This is The Voice of Reason. My name's Alex Belfield. A couple of weeks ago, I went to HMP Fosse Way to make a video about, in my view, the most out of control, broken, dangerous, and completely corrupt prison in Britain. I was there for 16 months. And during that period, where I was head of neurodiversity, I got to see every floor in every block and work with every single member of management, including the director who I was in the weekly meeting with, which they may now regret. Next week, I bring out my first book about HMP, Surviving the Slammer. It's released on September the 6th, and it tells the story of my first year at HMP STOCKEN, which is the most secure prison at CCAT level in Britain. They put me there because they wanted to monitor every single thing I said and did. In that year, the first year, I wrote my autobiography, His Own Worst Enemy, as well as my first book, which is out next week. In that year, I saw exactly what HMP is, which is an out-of-control monolith that believes it is rehabilitating people when in fact it is simply allowing people to be more corrupted when they come out than they were when they went in. They get to swap tricks and pass on experiences as how to be better criminals. It's a pecking order of who is the biggest and the bravest, and a pissing contest of which officer can seemingly be more embedded in various communities. The religious element didn't pass me by. I write about that in the next book, which is called A Complete Waste of Doing Time, which will be out just before Christmas. That tells the story of HMP Five Wells and Earlstoke, where I was sexually assaulted, which is on police record. I'm awaiting, as I record this, my reply from Shamima Shamima Mahood, who is the Lord Chancellor, the head of the prisons, if you will, and she will respond to over 200 points of corruption that I have endured in the last 5 years since being first arrested by the totally corrupt Nottingham police. I want to make this video today because I've been given some information which is tragic. It's also exclusive. Nobody has broadcast this before, and they don't want it broadcast. The consequences may well lead me back into prison. They said last time when I filmed at HMP Fosse Way that I did not break the law and that I told the truth. They did not accuse me of lying, exaggerating, or even making a single word up in the entire video, which I will put at the end of this. That video contained information of an assault on the 6th of August, where a man called Dennis Green had been assaulted on A block. Now, A block at levels 1 and 2, I used to work at a lot because it is drugs recovery and it is very volatile. In fact, it is shockingly violent. On a daily basis, officers are in fights, prisoners are beat up, and officers and prisoners get seriously hurt. The altercation on August 6 led Dennis Green to be airlifted out of HMP Fosse Way in an air ambulance and taken to the Leicester Royal Infirmary, where he was induced into a coma. Unfortunately, Dennis Green died. The man who was arrested on August 6, we understand, is prisoner Ward, who was arrested on the same day for the assault and has not returned to HMP Fosse Way since. Prisons like Fosse Way, which is a resettlement prison for people in the final couple of years of their sentence at max, most of them are indeed in their last 6 to 9 months, should not be facing the level of violence that is at Fosse Way. I've never seen anything like it. And it's partly down to the Boris Johnson super prison ideology that you can mix sex offenders with professional criminals. Never the twain will meet. Convicts that have been sent down for violent crimes do not appreciate being put into the same 1,800 deep prison as sex offenders, paedophiles, rapists, etc. They don't like it. And the nonces, and they're called nonces because they're not on normal courtyard exercise, which means they are in their own blocks E and F, overlooking the car park, so when your children go to visit, they can see them going in and out of reception. They are on E and F with their own playground. They are not on normal courtyard exercise with the rest of the population, of which I was one for 16 months, where I virtually was on every floor of every landing for reasons you will find out in book 6, which will be out in 2027. And by the way, regardless of whether they put me back in prison, Surviving the Slammer will be released next week, and the rest of the books will be released every 4 to 6 months after that. Our prisons are not only broken by admission of the Lord Chancellor, Mahood, they're not only on their knees, but they're deadly and they're devastating. Nearly 500 people die a year in prisons, and you never hear about it. This has not been reported. They sweep it under the carpet and they say, it's a druggie off A block, fuck him. That's how they feel, that's how they think, and that's how they operate as a prison service. I've seen it time and time again. I think during my time in Fosse Way, there were 12 deaths whilst I was there. Some of them were to do with elderly people, others were to do with illness, others were suicide, and now 2 are murder. Now, you might say, fuck them, they're prisoners. But it isn't until you find yourself in the system for words, mine was a non-violent, non-sexual, non-drugs related crime, that happened because a BBC person sent an email anonymously to close me down, and I wanted to find out who it was. It was published by a man I'd never heard of or met, and collectively the 2 of them got me 5 years. So when you find yourself in that situation, it is devastating to see human life taken without any regard whatsoever. Air ambulances were flying in and out of that prison like Heathrow. I've never seen anything like it. One day, 16 ambulances came. Now, you might say, fuck them, let them go in an ambulance. But remember, the 16 ambulances that are at Fosse Way in one day are not able to pick up your Auntie Fanny or your granddad who's had a heart attack. This is a daily occurrence. Ambulance after ambulance, mostly for overdoses, it has to be said, drugs related. Spice in Fosse Way is ridiculous. I told you in the video that they're the cheapest drugs in the country because the fly-ins from the drones, which I'll show you a video of how easy it is for prisoners to get drugs in, but it is mainly down to staff who bring them in and are still bringing them in, my sources tell me, despite 4 in 1 week being arrested for corruption in public office at the time that I made the video, which you'll see at the end. What I explain in my book is that there, by the grace of God, none of us know whether we're going to end up in a prison. And they put me in Britain's newest prison, HMP Fosse Way, because I think they thought that it was the least bad risk for them at the point that I wasn't dead. They hoped I'd kill myself within the first year. And you'll see the pressure they put on me and the lies they told me from probation, these scum-sucking pond life that led me to believe if I behaved and did the right thing, I'd end up in DCAT, which is open prison. They lied relentlessly. They then sent me to psychology to try and brand me mental, unwell, and indeed section me. Sadly for them, the 2 most senior forensic psychologists, they signed me off in 4 hours. They said there's nothing wrong with him. These are people at the very top of HMP. I have the document. It doesn't matter what the Nancy trolls say. It doesn't matter what the mental bog-eyed people try and convince you of. The truth is the truth, and it's in that book, Surviving the Slammer. But I just want you to know that Dennis Green, who I understand wasn't even 40 years old, he was mid-30s, went to prison believing that he would serve his time and get out. The last man who was murdered in HMP Fosse Way was out the following day. You might think it's funny or you don't care that people die in prison, but when you see it firsthand and you see bodies being taken out left, right and centre for 2.9 years like I did in every single prison that I was at, Fosse Way was by far the worst. But I saw it everywhere I went. I played the piano for several funerals at STOCKEN, as you will read in the book. And the families came into the prison for me as a prisoner to play the piano at their memorial service. The system stinks on every single level. The lies, the cheating, the corruption, and the cover-up. How could a man die in a British prison having been so severely assaulted he was induced into a coma and later died, and nobody has reported it? You can say what you like about me. I'm a convicted talker. Yes, I went to prison for words, having been set up, stitched up by a man who wanted to close me down and a person who published it who I'd never heard of or met. 5 years. And I simply wanted to know who it was. I wasn't accused of fear of violence. There was no violence involved. There wasn't even me going round or doing anything. I wasn't accused of that. I emailed more than twice. And that's the law. When they want to stitch you up, they will conflate it in any way. And that's how Lucy Conley ended up in jail. That's how I ended up in jail. And Wayne O'Rourke, who's also at HMP Fosse Way, who I am gravely concerned about because he was on A4, super enhanced. And they've moved him. I'm not going to say where because it could put him in danger and make him vulnerable. And I'm very reluctant to talk about Wayne because a lot of people talked about me whilst I was in prison, and that impacts you because they're so vicious, vile, malicious and vindictive, they get their own back on the prisoner. But Wayne O'Rourke was a man who had a Twitter channel who said a lot of things about the riots last year and was arrested on the Sunday night, was charged, and by Friday never saw his kids again and was put into jail. Now, in tomorrow's news, you'll see endless stories of suspended sentences for violent and sexual crimes. Suspended sentences. Yet another man, Wayne O'Rourke, ends up in jail for words. Prisons are off their tits. Watch this.
Y ahora sí, tampoco estoy mal.
You're gonna
Fuck! You tell me.
Wi-Fi in prison. Where there's will, there's a way.
What's this you're doing? In the EX?
Package lands safely in prison.
Kick that cell door to me feet got sore. PTSD like I've been at war. No GCSE cause I've been on tour. Don't even feel like me no more. All of that shit that I seen and saw. The guy to the right just died next door in a jail OT. I ain't got no mates there. When I went London I never went Mayfair.
Dès que j'arrive ça regarde de travers. Capuché parce que je suis trop.
He ain't gonna play about me. Mama telling me I gotta
Well, I'm not going to say any more. If you are curious, you can read my book as to what prison is really like. I spill the beans on everything. There are some good officers, but they're few and far between. There are some experienced, talented officers, but they're few and far between. I could name names of some really great officers at Fosse Way, but they're outnumbered 100 to 1. Because there's too many 18-year-old nose-pierced, pink-haired women and young fellas who go in who are not equipped to deal with professional convicts who will intimidate them and corrupt them. And because Serco, who run this prison and also do the tags and also deal with the dinghy divers, sorry, I can't say dinghy divers, I'm not allowed, the council wrote to me, I have to say travellers without anywhere to stay. Serco are responsible for all of this, and if you Google who's behind Serco, it appears it's something to do with Winston Churchill's grandson. Very, very influential company. But that jail's off its head. And every day, there's code blues, code reds, and now 2 murders. Let's see whether they throw me back in prison. They said, you cannot bring HMP into disrepute. I don't give 2 fucks about your repute. You don't have any. I lived it for 2.9 years. I know exactly what happens in your prisons. I know how absolutely corrupt middle management are and how disgusting the bosses are that they couldn't give 2 fucks that people die across the estate on a daily basis. I think the park in Wales had 15 deaths of spice in 2 or 3 months at the beginning of last year. Can you imagine sweeping up the corpses of 16 people and nobody flinches, nobody does anything about it, nobody cares, because we're convicts? There are some crimes that are unforgivable. Well, I would have a whole phone-in and debate about what we do with those people. And, you know, for the Wayne Couzens of the world and certain people like the Southport killer or the Nottingham murderer here, I would suggest there's a much cheaper, safer alternatives for officers who should not be around those people. There's a much easier solution. But everybody else has an end date. Life never means life. They have an end date and then they're rehabilitated. And at that point, they can live their life again. Imagine going in believing you'd come out rehabilitated and ending up in a body bag. The notion that HMP, MOJ, the Home Office, whoever it is behind this witch hunt, threatened me by going back to prison for disrepute. There is no such thing. And challenging their efficacy. They have no efficacy. I've lived it. You cannot stop me having my truth, having my lived experience in the books that will be published. And they will be, whether I'm in prison or here talking to you. But I want you to know the reason I'm making this video is not one person has reported the murder of a man at HMP Fosse Way that happened on August 6. 2 weeks he was in a coma. I'll play you the video that they said they were going to throw me back in jail for, so maybe they'll throw me back in jail for this, even though they've said, I did not lie, I told the truth, and I haven't broke the law. So we live in a country, by telling the truth and not breaking the law, they will put you in prison to silence you. If that doesn't terrify you, nothing will. And this ain't about me. I've already served 2.9 years. If I have to do another 2.6 that's left, so be it. That's what it is. I will never change. I will never surrender. Never surrender to evil. Never surrender to shushy people that want to tell me I don't have a right to the truth or the right to do my journalism, which Judge Saney said in the Clown Court, I am. I am a journalist. I always was for 30 years, and I'm entitled to make this video. They just don't like it because the truth hurts. I think the air ambulance is flying over now, ready to land back at Fosse Way to collect another corpse. It's shocking. I send my condolences to the family of Dennis Green. Another murder, and nobody finds out about it. It comes from a convict, a convicted talker. The whistleblower of the BBC, the #1 whistleblower at the BBC, who they handed the file to the police to shut me up after one of their people said, let's close him down. It's all on court record, published by a man I'd never met, 5 years. It will be in book 2. We will release it in March 2028. You can find out what really happened in court, and there's nothing they can do about it, just like the prison book, Surviving the Slammer, that's out next week. They're fucked. Whether they throw me back in prison, that book's coming out. And every word I swear on my mother's life is the truth. But why does that scare them so much? Here's the video that I made that got me bollocking from probation, a letter threatening to throw me back in prison for questioning their efficacy and undermining. I mean, what the fuck? I am a prisoner. I'm a convict. I'm a rehabilitated genius, if you will. But I am not an employee of the state who is responsible for anything to do with the reputation of their corrupt and self-diagnosed broken prison system. Watch this.